Thank you very much, Simeon. And I can explain the title of this presentation very simply. It was originally supposed to be called something else, but then Simeon said, do you know, I think I'd rather break my own leg and get sent to hospital than intend a presentation called that. So I thought, maybe I should be, doing something about that. So I thought, well, what could I call it that would be sort of catchy? And that's what I came up with. Now, I complained yesterday that we didn't have enough philosophy in the convening, and now I'm complaining that we don't usually have enough literature. Because those are Shakespeare fans among you will recognize that this is a title, the title is taken from Shakespeare's Henry IV, Part 2. And it's a scene where Falstaff and Shallow and Silent are, how can I put this, examining volunteers for military service. It's full of the things which in those days passed for jokes. We might not agree now, but it's also the title of a well-known book in England about bizarre surnames and where they come from. So this is not really about warts or surnames at all, but it is about identifiers. Now, we've had, for some time in the Mojaloop community, we've had what we've come to call the duplicate problem. And the duplicate problem goes like this. In Mojaloop, we ask for people to send, when they want to send money, to say who do they want to send it to, and to do that by providing some kind of identifier, something that they know about the person they're going to send to. Now, the example we almost always use is a mobile phone number, because most people who have accounts of any kind have mobile phones, and mostly they're unique. What we're really trying to do with this is identify the DFSP to send a payment request to. We're not saying that this is the only thing that can be known about the person, a reliable thing even. What we're saying is it's something that a DFSP, your mobile money system or your bank, will recognize as belonging to you. And we do this by asking them for some information and then identifying a DFSP who recognizes that piece of information. Then we ask the DFSP directly if it will commit to crediting one of its customers based on that information. Now, it's an important distinction. Well, I think it's an important distinction, but that's the kind of boring person I am. It's important that what we're asking, we're not providing an account number. We're not providing something which the bank immediately recognizes and say, okay, I don't need to know anything more about that. I know where to send the funds. What we're saying is, here's an identifier, which might be an alias or a national ID number or a merchant ID number. And we're saying to the bank, if I gave you this piece of information, would you be able to transfer funds to somebody based on it? The problem comes, the duplicate problem comes, when more than one DFSP recognizes that piece of information. Because the question then is, which of those DFSPs should the payment be addressed to? If a DFSP could map that information onto more than one account, if, for instance, I have a savings account and a checking account and an investment account and so on, we think that's not our problem. It's the DFSP's problem. It's up to the DFSP to decide which of those accounts they should be crediting. We don't want to think about that. The problem is a 2 DFSP, or indeed a more than 2 DFSP problem. So, let's have some examples. Customer joins more than one mobile money system. Now, those of you who have the inexpressible joy of living in Africa probably won't think this is much of a problem, because in Africa, almost all the mobile money systems are run by mobile network operators. So if I have a Safaricom phone, then I can join M-Pesa, but I can't join Tigo Pay. There's a one-to-one identification typically between mobile network operators and mobile money systems. In a lot of world, that's not true. You can simply download a mobile money system, no matter which mobile network you use, and then you can use that. So there's nothing to stop you downloading more than one mobile money system, and then the operators of each of those systems will respond to a request for your phone number and say, yeah, I can do something with that. It's also possible, of course, because banks recognize mobile money systems as, banks recognize mobile phone numbers as aliases, that a customer might have an account at a mobile money system and also be using her phone number as an alias to identify her bank number. Now, the mobile money operator and the bank both say, yes, I can deal with that payment. Still worse, we have situations where if mobile money systems can be downloaded onto phones and people share phones, as we know they do, it's possible that the husband might have an account at one mobile money system and the wife might have an account at another mobile money system. Again, if all you know is the phone number, you say, yeah, I can do that. Merchant codes we were talking about earlier on, and one of the reasons for the new developments in merchant codes is to prevent the situation where different systems, different financial systems, give the same code to more than one, give the same code to different merchants. Now, I guess everybody here has had the experience, you go into a coffee shop or a restaurant and there's things that say, want to pay Tigo Pay? Use code 123456. Want to pay M-Pesa? Use code 245678, and so on. Now, of course, one of the things that the companies want to do is to keep those identifiers simple. And therefore, keeping them simple multiplies the likelihood that they will overlap and that the same code will be used by different DFSPs, for different businesses. And then it's worse than it is with mobile numbers, because at least with a mobile number, you can recognize that the chances are it is you that we're talking about. With a code like a merchant ID, it could be completely different ones. Another problem is core banking systems. Now, most banks use core banking systems that they buy, or sometimes open source ones. Now, the problem is that core banking systems tend to give meaning to the digits in account numbers. So, for instance, a particular number in a particular position will say, is this a savings account or a checking account or an investment account? And that multiplies the chances that the different banks will have accounts with the same number. And therefore, if you just have an account number, both of those banks will say, yes, I can deal with that payment, but they will be referring to different people and different account numbers. So, we can look at this as a matrix. Our favorite thing is the top left, where we have one entity and one DFSP. We should never be in a situation, I don't think, where one DFSP has got multiple entities with the same code. That should never happen. If it does, it's a problem for the DFSP. But then we have two sets of things that we need to talk about. In the first case, there are multiple DFSPs who are talking about one entity with the same identifier, and that's the mobile phone number case. More than one DFSP recognizes the same mobile phone number, and it belongs to the same person. On the right, at the bottom, we've got identifiers which are not unique. Those are like account numbers, merchant IDs that we've just talked about. The number is the same, the DFSP is different, but the entity that it points to, the customer, is different as well. So, how can we solve this problem? If they are at the same DFSP, then the DFSP can solve the problem. We don't need to worry about it. Otherwise, we could have some third party which maintained a list of user preferences, and the debtor DFSP could access that third party. Pardon me. So we could have a register that says these different DFSPs use the same identifier. If you get a request, the customer has said, please send it to that one and not that one. The alternative is that the debtor DFSP must solve the problem. And that is essentially, we think, the long-term reliable solution, if we can find a way to do it. Now, this is one of those sessions where I'm not reporting on the fantastic successes that we've got, and I'm not talking about the things that we have to do. This is an appeal for help to you in the community, because this is a problem that we need to solve. And I don't think any of us yet knows what the best way of solving that is. So all contributions gratefully accepted. Now, let's look at this case where an identifier at multiple DFSPs points to the same entity. It's the phone number problem. In that case, we'll always make a payment to the right customer. So we can't go badly wrong, but it won't always be to an account they expect. It might be, for instance, to an account on a mobile money system that they don't use anymore. Or it might be at a bank account that they don't use anymore, that sort of thing. Case 2 is where a single identifier points to different entities at multiple DFSPs, and that is a problem. Because in that case, we may not be paying the right customer. And if we don't pay the right customer, then obviously a dispute arises. I want to talk now about what I call uniqueness contexts. Now, all identifiers are unique within a given context. We've said before, DFSPs don't give the same identifier to different customers of theirs. Mostly that context is implicit. So we don't normally say, we have an account number, we have a merchant ID, and it's valid within this context. We ought to say that, but typically we don't. So go back to the coffee shop example. You go in there and it says, if you're paying with Tigo Pay, use this code. And that means the uniqueness context for those codes is Tigo Pay. Tigo Pay won't give the same code to more than one person, but some other mobile company might. If we knew what the context was, would that resolve the problem? And my answer is partially. It would help us with some of the problems that we've got, but not with all of them. And we assume, by the way, that the minimum context is the account holding institution, the DFSP. So, when we try to distinguish between those two cases, case 1 and case 2 that I talked to about, where multiple identifiers point to the same entity, instances of that entity will share characteristics other than the end identifier, and which is a, how can I put this? It's a smart-assed way of saying the people will probably have the same or a similar name, for instance. When you give your name to a mobile money company, it's generally the same name, or at least a recognizably similar name. And of course, there are algorithms around that will tell you how well names match with each other. So we can characterize identifier types according to the expected uniqueness concept that they have. A Musdan is globally unique. Somebody's phone number only occurs once in the world. A national ID is expected to be nationally unique. So if you know the country, for instance, that you're sending to and the national ID, then that's a good uniqueness identifier. A merchant ID is scheme unique if we're using the Mojaloop merchant extensions that you heard about this morning. Otherwise, it's probably just DFSP unique. And a bank account number is probably DFSP unique, unless it has some additional piece of information, such as, for instance, a branch identifying number, a bank business identification number, or something like that. But on its own, a bank account number is only unique within that bank. So the first test is more reliable, and the second test is simpler. It just says, if multiple DFSPs are in the same context, same country or something like that, then duplication is type 1. It is the same person. The question is just, which account should we be sending the funds to? So let's look at how something like this might work in a couple of worked examples. We've got a user over there, and she says to her DFSP, I want to send funds to this Musden. Bank sends it to the Mojaloop switch, and the Mojaloop switch looks and says, oh, okay, I have two DFSPs who registered that Musden. One is M-Pesa and one is Momo. Now, if the beneficiary has accounts at two DFSPs, then the first DFSP says yes, and here is the name, which a Mojaloop DFSP does when it responds. And Momo also says yes, and gives the same name. So now the switch can say the names match, and therefore these are alternate accounts for the same entity. You can go back and say, you can pay that person at these DFSPs. And the beneficiary, sorry, the sender can be asked which of those they intend to send to. Now, of course, there's no guarantee that the answer they give would be the same answer the account holder gave, but at least they can ask the account holder, or might know already, those sorts of things. So we've got somewhere where somebody who is presumed to know something about the situation can say which of these DFSPs they intend to give the money to. Where two beneficiaries share an ID, we get an answer back that says, M-Pesa says it belongs to one person, and Momo says it belongs to another person. Now the switch says the names don't match. That's more important than the DFSPs not matching. So now when I report back, I will say, you can pay this person or that person. Now the chances are good at this point that the person who's sending the money will know which the right name is and will therefore give a good response to the question. Now let's look at overlapping identifiers. That is things like the account number or the merchant ID. Again, we use a merchant ID. That goes to two different DFSPs as before. One says it's, Miller's not here. He was complaining earlier today that the famously delicious establishment Miller's Burgers hasn't yet been mentioned this convening. So I was going to put him out of his misery. So M-Pesa says that belongs to Miller's Burgers. Momo says, no, it belongs to Matt's Pizza. Again, the switch can say there's no name match, and we can therefore look at the uniqueness context, whatever it is, and report back to say you can either pay this name or that name. So it looks like we have a rule that might work. It won't be perfect because, as you've seen from these examples, it's possible that the person who's sending the money might not reliably know whether the person they're sending the money to would want their money in this account or in that account. But broadly speaking, it should prevent people directing funds to the wrong account or to the wrong entity. So we've got a way for the switch to resolve duplicates into a meaningful set of questions, and a way of sharing that with the debtor DFSP, and through that to the person who wants to send the money, which is good. But it may not be completely everything that we need to do. First of all, there's the question of signatures, non-repudiation signatures. Now, in the Mojaloop system, the creditor DFSP, when it sends back something saying, I recognize this ID, signs that response. And that means I am making you a promise that I can credit to an account identified with that identifier and that that account can receive funds. So there's a promise attached to it, which is made by the creditor DFSP. But now we would have multiple responses in the examples we've been looking at, but we've only got space for one non-repudiation signature. How could we solve this question? Well, we could ask the switch to sign the composite response. We could ask the switch to compose the response and add the signatures somewhere so that all of the signatures are there. Sorry. But the problem with all of those, well, the problem with the first of those, the switch responding, is that now the sending institution doesn't have a reliable source that says, yes, the person who owns the account says I can send funds to it. All it has is something that says the switch says that, which is, in our world, not nearly as good or reliable a promise as a promise that's made by the actual account holding institution. So the second question is, how does the sender choose? If the switch were to return multiple responses in the agreed format, they can still only be actioned by the user interface of the sender's DFSP. So the user interface that the mobile money system provides or the bank provides and things like that has to be able to recognize that there is a choice and have a way of asking the user, the sender of the funds, to say, here is the choice, what do you choose? So either the sender's DFSP will have to modify its user interface to allow the choice to be made, or we would have to look at providing standard functionality in the form, for instance, of a USSD menu or a web part, which DFSP UIs could call. They would still have to do something, but it wouldn't be as much. That's where I've got to in thinking about this problem. As I say, I'm not sure that we've got to the end of this. In fact, I'm pretty sure we haven't. And I'm also pretty sure that exposing the problem to you in the way I have will result in better solutions than I could arrive at on my own, because lots of people thinking about the same thing is always better than one person sitting thinking about the same thing. So with that, I'm going to throw the discussion open and to ask if anybody has any questions or indeed comments, suggestions, requests for further quotations from Shakespeare, anything really. Yes, George.
Yeah, thank you. This is a difficult problem to solve. Yeah, I think some of the comments I wanted to make is, I get why you're asking the person sending to make a choice. But in some cases, one of the unintended consequences is information leakage. So I'm sending to you and you've given me one phone number. And all of a sudden, I know Michael not only has mobile, he has a SACCO account, he also has a bank account. So it could represent a challenge from just a data privacy point of view.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I see where you're going with this. I guess the other scenario which you could explore, and you alluded to that, is where you do a registry. But the registry also has its own challenges, because are you going to centralize? Are you going to federate? Are you going to do a hybrid?
Yes.
Yeah, but I just wanted to point that out. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, we have thought occasionally about whether Mojaloop should provide, or well, let's say, whether the directories that Mojaloop already provides should contain more information than just information about the identifier and the DFSP to which it belongs. The problem with maintaining central registers of information is that everybody's got to keep them up to date. And in my experience, they always do lag slightly behind real changes in people's information. It also means, of course, that bits of personal identifying information are held centrally. And one of the principles that we've always tried to maintain in Mojaloop is the switch, the central switch, shouldn't maintain any more information than it absolutely has to. Personally identifying information should be retained by the DFSPs, and it shouldn't be passed around any more than is absolutely necessary. So yes, I understand what you're thinking. I think the central idea we've thought about in the past and have decided against it. It's more interesting. Sorry, I've forgotten now the first thing that you said, which I thought I wanted to pick up. Remind me. Oh, the information leakage. Yeah. But again, in this situation, we're not putting very much more information than we would in any case. It's rather like, I don't know if you recall, it used to be that mobile money systems did not give you the name of the person you were sending to. So you would just say, I want to send it to this number, and it would be sent. That meant that there were a lot of instances of funds being sent to the wrong people because people typed in the phone number wrong. And there were whole call centers that were just dedicated to remedying those problems. When name matching was first suggested, or name identification was, then one of the objections that was raised was exactly this one, is it would enable people to find out an identification between people's names and their phone numbers, which is rather like the identification between people's names and their DFSPs, or people's numbers and their DFSPs. The mobile money operators and their regulators decided the advantages were so great that it was worth the risk. And those call centers closed. It became very much cheaper. I won't say it became very much cheaper to use a mobile money system, but it certainly became very much lower cost to use a mobile money system. And in that case, as I say, people took the view that the risk was worth it. Again, we're trying to have the minimum of information passed back and forth. Sorry, okay. George, you're back. You want to come back again? No, there's another mic's on its way.
Yeah. Did you consider trying to create a hierarchy? So let me explain. So say one person is using a phone number, it's in a bank account, it's in an e-wallet, and it's on a system like M-Pesa. So when they say they want to send money, you want to ask, where is this person? Is it in a bank? Is it in a e-wallet? Okay, that's what we call them. Or is it a mobile money system? Did you consider that? And what were your thoughts, pros and cons around that?
Well, the problem with that, I think, is how do you establish the hierarchy and who establishes it? Because different people, different customers may want to have a different hierarchy. Everybody will want to say, yes, I want the money to be sent to the account I'm using at the moment. But the account you're using at the moment may be at a bank, and for your friend, it may be at a mobile money system. So it's not, I don't think we can automatically assign a hierarchy. One of the things we suggested, actually, this came from Miller a while ago, was to say we should just return the most recently opened account, because the chances are best that that's the account people will be using. May not be completely reliable, but that's a suggestion. And it's essentially a suggestion of that kind, is automatically to acquire a hierarchy. Now, if we don't do it automatically, we would need to do it manually, and then we would need some central way for customers to say, I have these accounts and this is the one I want funds sent to. Now, at the moment, we don't have any way of communicating directly with customers. It all goes through the DFSPs, and obviously we don't want DFSPs doing land grabs where your DFSP over there says, well, of course, all these funds should come to me. But it may not be the case that you really want them to go to that DFSP. So there are problems associated with that, which again mean that we've not, well, I'd say we've had reservations about using that as a solution. Any other question? One there.
Oh, okay. That is a serious problem. As my colleague told me, there's a country which implemented it and where multiple accounts from different DFSPs were displayed, and you select the one to pay to. And actually, it is a data privacy concern. I don't want to know someone else know that I have accounts in bank A, B, C, and wallets and things. Even the hierarchy is not a solution, as with my phone number, I can have accounts in 3 banks. So if we're aggregating by banks, so it will not solve. But what if we consider for someone having the same identifier in different institutions, if the payee is about to be paid, a prompt is given to the payee, so and so wants to pay you, would you select the account to be paid for on this payment? And then they select, and the flow continues with that account he selected for that particular transaction.
Yep, that's an attractive solution. My worry is that it relies on the creditor, the payee, available to respond to that question. Because if you ask that question and you don't get a response, and of course DFSPs would have to modify their solutions to ask that question, which they don't at the moment, then if you can't get the answer, what do you do? Do you go back to the sender and say, sorry, your beneficiary is not online at the moment, so I can't send any money? The sender says, what? I'm only trying to send money. I don't want to talk to them. So anything which relies on the presence of the creditor is problematic, in my view. It becomes more problematic if we think about creditors who are businesses and may only be available in business hours and those sorts of things. So it is an attractive solution, but I think it has its own problems.
That would make them select type of transaction for type of account, and the hub being able to map those routes. So saying that if it's a merchant payment, I'm ready to get them on this account. If it is a P2P, I can get them on this account. Those kind of mapping probably would be a solution.
Yeah, and again, that's a central registry solution, I think. Now, it's possible that we might be able to make a solution like that work, but it's not immediately obvious to me what we would need to do in order for it to work generally and for everybody.
Yes, this is basically a contribution. First of all, thank you for bringing to our attention a problem concerning with identity management. So what I observe from your submission is that we are coming up with a solution to address identity of our people in the payment ecosystem. So if we leveraged the experience yesterday we had concerning the legal entity identifier, I know that's at the national level, international level, but we adopt the same approach to to jurisdictions where these instant payment systems are.
Yeah.
And we integrate these instant payment systems with the national identification systems.
Mhm.
And probably you have this prefix from the digital financial service provider.
Yeah.
And subsequently, this instant switch references this national identity management system with the prefix. Then probably at the national level, you have an efficient payment system.
Yep.
But the question will be, what about cross-border? If it comes to, for example, the digital retail payment platform proposed by COMESA,
Mhm.
you would require probably governance related issue, clauses where probably these entities or the national jurisdiction have their specific set of information that can be referenced to the central registers so that you synchronize. So I believe it's an issue of infrastructure. The interoperability now still comes in as another problem. But again, what is the minimum level of information that you could keep at a cross-border payment system?
Yep.
In this case, for example, the digital retail payment platform.
I agree. I mean, the problem with that, or one of the problems with that, I think, is that it means that essentially, if you're making a domestic payment, then you don't need a prefix on front of a national ID because it's your national ID and it's your jurisdiction. If, on the other hand, it turns out that you're making a payment using a national ID and it belongs somewhere else, then you have to add the prefix. So that becomes problematic, I think. You're right, there needs to be a way of doing this would be to insist that everybody has a unique identifier. And that's the way, for instance, that UPI have done it in India. They've said everybody needs to have an Aadhaar number. You can get it from the government, and it's the Aadhaar number that you have to use if you want to make a payment. Problem is, one of the attractions of using a phone number is that people know each other's phone numbers. And if you don't know somebody's phone number, if you don't know your friend's phone number, what do? You look in your phone and it tells you. So people have got that information, whereas Aadhaar numbers or national numbers, unique numbers of other kinds, it's not something that people know, and it's something that people could very easily, first of all, find difficult to enter, and second of all, make mistakes with. So again, it's a possibility from the uniqueness point of view, but it's a problem from the usability point of view.
Hi, I have a question, Michael, it just from a logistical side of things. You
Sorry,
mentioned...
Can you speak up a bit, Julie?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Is it better? The question I have is, like you mentioned that you are asking people to help contributing on this.
Yes.
How would that work? Is it a new work stream that will be created about this?
Well, I think the idea is I will ask people to concentrate hard on their solutions, and my psychic powers will enable me to tune into them. You're completely right, Julie. I will set up a channel. I will, as my action from this convening, I will set up a channel on the Mojaloop Slack, to which I hope everybody here belongs or will belong pretty soon, and we can talk about it on there. Does that seem like a good idea? Okay.
Thank you. And can I call as well, Francis, to join this channel? Because in the Philippines, you implemented a specific solution as well, right?
You have a quick comment and question, I guess. Well, I'd like to make the counter argument that phone numbers are, at least in our market, phone numbers are becoming less and less relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Younger generations don't even know their phone numbers, right? I mostly even just give out my IG handle or Twitter account, like to connect to people, which brings me to my question of, have we considered actually just implementing where you have your own unique handle that identifies a person and that sort of links to, multiple accounts that you may have?
So my answer is yes, we have. And Mojaloop already supports what we call aliases, which is a general catch-all term for some identifier or other. The problem with that is the definition of the uniqueness space. It's the same as it is for merchant IDs. Because when I want to register, let's suppose I frequently send money to my mum, I register an identifier called mum, or I get my mum to register an identifier called mum, and now it's all fine because I can send my mum some money. Except that most people have got mums, and lots of people are going to want to. So uniqueness is a problem there. If we could find some way of ensuring, rather than the way we do with mail addresses, that we identify the uniqueness space as well as the identifier, then that would something that would work. So for instance, something like a Twitter handle or something like that, as long as you say that's unique within the Twitter space or unique within the Instagram space or whatever it might be, that would work. Again, it's a sphere of uniqueness, space of uniqueness problem, I think. I think we're only 12 and a half minutes over time. Senior.
I realize we probably need to do a deeper workshop session where we collate all these ideas. Would you be willing to facilitate that in coming weeks?
I don't think anything would give me greater pleasure. But if I think of anything, I'll let you all know.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Michael. I recognize this is quite a problem that needs a lot of time and thinking. So I think we'll work with Michael to facilitate a conversation to see how we can come up with a solution to the duplicate problem. Thank you so much. Round of applause for Michael.